بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair for taking time out to join me here today. I can see, I think there's three brothers, Mirza, Saad and Anwar. Am I right? Any more? Or just three? Okay. Yeah, so this is a series which Mufti Saab has kind of advised me to do and to cover some of the things Muslims in a modern time have difficulty maybe understanding, and covers many of the aspects of why people can leave Islam, and also subjects which non-Muslims find difficult in understanding about not only Islam but any religion which believes in a God. So I thought, because it's a three-part series, I'll split it into three different questions, and today I'll be focusing specifically on evil and suffering. Why does God? And the question that many non-Muslims with weak Iman or atheists would ask: why does God allow evil and suffering to exist in the world? So I'll inshallah today I'll go through this in detail and trying to get an answer and a conclusion from it. Okay. Feel free, brothers, if you have any question, just pop it down and I'll try and answer it as best as I can. And if there's anything that's unclear, just ask me to repeat it and I'll try my best. As I said, this is my first time teaching, so inshallah it goes well. Right, so my name is Abduladim. I'm a Darul Ilm student, year 5, with Mufti Saab and Mufti Javid. So today we'll be covering why does God allow evil and suffering to exist in the world. So the aim of this lesson today, the first part of 3, will tackle the following. Okay. Yeah. So I'll be tackling the following bullet points. I'll go through the bullet points in each slide, and if there's anything I need to add, I'll do that. Okay. So this lesson will tackle the following. First, it will shed light on the problem of evil and human suffering, okay, from the Islamic perspective. So evil and harm and destruction that happens in the world. I'll try and explain it, what Islam says about that. What does Islam say about suffering? What does Islam say about hardships in life, and the tribulations and the trials that come, whether that's to ourselves, to our family, or to an ummah, or to a nation. So on a purely Islamic perspective, not on anything secular. We'll try and define what evil is. Okay, what evil actually is, because many times what people think is evil might not be evil, and what people think is good, it might not be good. So we have to first off search from the Quran, from the Sunnah, what evil is defined by. Okay. And then we'll talk about, after that, about the theological Aqidah schools that came out of the debates about evil, because issues to do with free will, and whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who controls all and everything. This has sparked a debate in Islamic history, scholastic history. So, and different schools of Aqidah came about because of the difference of opinion. So I'll talk about the issues between defining good and evil in Islam, and some of the schools of Aqidah that came and what they argued was the correct opinion. And then I'll look at somebody you've probably heard of, Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah, and his take on the issue. So I'll speak about how he defines evil. What does he think? Does evil have a function? Does it have a certain purpose in our life? Does it have anything to do with us and other creatures of Allah? Or does it have anything to do with us and Allah and building our relationship with Him? So Imam Al-Ghazali in his Ihya Ulumuddin has a interesting take on the issue, especially when it comes to things like tawakkul and tawakkul and reliance on Allah, etc. Okay. I'll also like to talk about the Sufi understanding of tribulation and what does Ulama of Tasawwuf, especially the most known, probably one of the most known, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. He has a few texts which go on describing the issue. So I'll look at what he views, how he views tribulation and evil in the world. And then we'll talk about generally how a Muslim, why a Muslim is important for him to maintain patience and tawakkul, reliance on Allah. And we'll maybe talk about a few of the ayat and hadith which talk about the virtues of doing that. Because evil needs patience and it needs persistence in life. And then, right, we'll talk about prophets, because prophets are our examples, they are our role models, and how, and they never escape this tribulation and evil in their life. You know, every prophet faced some sort of harm, some sort of difficulty, and because they are our role models, and the Quran mentions them for us to learn from them. We'll talk about some of these prophets, the main ones that specifically, like Ayub alayhi salam. And then finally I'll conclude and I'll try and answer the question as best as I can, how Islam views evil and its relation between the human being and his Lord. Okay. Does that sound okay? Or is there anything else you expected? Okay. Just interact with me, brothers. You know. So I hate preaching for a long time. It's good to have interactions and to discuss different issues. It makes the lesson much more enjoyable. We can learn from each other as well, inshallah. Okay. So I'll start with the introduction. Right, so the problem of evil, as we probably know, is debated throughout the world. It's debated here in the UK and different when it comes to religious debates. If you ever watch Sunday morning programs, you'll see the big questions. You know, they often debate this issue. Why does God allow evil and harm in the world? If He is such a powerful, controlling God, and He's so merciful and loving, like Al-Wadud, Al-Rahim, Al-Rahman, why does He allow these conflicts to happen, death, misery, illnesses, disabilities? So the question is important to answer because it questions our aqidah. It questions our belief in the existence of Allah, the existence of God. I use the word God here, so if we want to forward this to non-Muslims, they can relate to this. I think better use God. Okay, but maybe I'll say Allah in my talk. So it's important to understand this issue because it affects and really questions our belief in Allah and His attributes. Okay, unless somebody's trained and like you brothers have come, unless you know the answer, many Muslims unfortunately don't know, and they have two options: either they stick their head in the sand and pretend the question doesn't exist or whatever. You know, I believe in Allah and I say no more. And that's okay, but that doesn't go into, if somebody's interested in going into the work of da'wah and calling non-Muslims into Islam or becoming a scholar of Islam, then the issue has to be tackled, unfortunately. It has to be tackled. And the issue is especially strong when it comes to undeserving suffering. You know, when children die in a battle, die under a strike, you know, when a bomb goes off and a baby dies, you know, many of us will see that as undeserving. You know, what did this child do to deserve to die that way and to be punished in a certain way? So Islam, you know, and we have to ask this, and how can Allah allow you know, small children, disabled people, innocent people have nothing to do with a war, for example? Why do they die? You know, why do they have to suffer when the guilty ones get away? And it says also that the following will shed light on the treatment of the problem of evil from an Islamic perspective. Like I said, So we'll look at the Quran, how evil is looked at, and I'll mention later on that it's actually in categories, and not all evil is the same. Okay, and there's natural evil, there's evil that comes from our own acts, there's evil that comes from other people's acts, and and Allah says, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وَزْرَ أُخْرَى, that one human being cannot face the burden of somebody else, or cannot carry the burden of somebody else. Many of the ulama say that this is only in the next life. In the next life, of course, we will all stand individually in front of Allah, and I will not be taken into account for the actions of somebody else. But in this dunya, it's obvious that how others act, it does affect us. It does affect us. So we'll look at that as well. It says here the Quran tackles this subject from a range of stories. So one of the things about the Quran, which is so beautiful, is it makes things easy through stories. And these stories are not just merely stories, but they are true historical facts. This is part of our belief. Allah says, مَا كَانَ حَدِيثًا يُفْتَرَى. These are not made up stories. These are true historical facts that have occurred in this world. And because the sunnah of Allah, وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا, you'll not find in the way of Allah any change. We can relate to them, and what happened, like the popular saying, if we don't learn from history, history will repeat itself. So, and this is true from the Quranic point of view. So by learning from them, learning from how they coped with suffering and how they understood suffering, we can get an answer to the question. The scholars also debated free will and predestination. Does a human being have control over his own destiny, or is everything created by Allah, and Allah is the one who controls and ultimately has the final say? This is debated not only now, but 1,000 years ago. And also, it's good to look at what the Sufis have to say about the issue, because Islam also is an outward but also an inward religion, and much of the Quran Sunnah does speak about the inward realities. So the Sufis have developed this science, and they actually have a very interesting point of view when it comes to evil and its relationship between Allah and His creation. And we'll look at finally, is suffering, like, do we need suffering to reach Allah? A human being rarely goes to Allah in a time of happiness. Do we need suffering as humans to turn to Allah for help, turn to Him and for supplications and for obedience? Okay, so we'll look at that as well. So the Quranic point of view. So what the Quran is, the book of Allah. It is the literal word of Allah revealed on the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1,400 years ago in Arabic, and it is 114 chapters long, 6,000 verses long. And basically, as Muslims, we get our teachings from the Quran. What the Quran says, our morals comes from the Quran, our ethics comes from the Quran. How we view the world is from the Quranic point of view. So for a Muslim, it's natural when any subject comes up, he looks at it from what the Quran says. This is natural for any Muslim. It shapes or influences our world view. Okay. It is the highest source of scholarship. So whenever you want to start learning about Islam, you have to look at the Quran first. And to begin answering questions on suffering and evil, one must study the Quranic narrative. Okay, and the Quran talks a lot about good and evil, so that's a good starting point to answer the question. Is just by looking at what the Quran says. So whenever we study evil in the world, we just assume that evil means personal loss, loss of our parents, loss of our children, loss of our family, other family members, violence, killing, death. Illness, serious illnesses, cancer, diabetes. We see these as evil things in the world, the natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, avalanches. These are also natural events that we see as evil. So when we say evil, generally, on a secular point of view, this is what we mean. But there is ambiguity, it says here, when it comes to defining what exactly is evil. Does that default position of what evil is concur with what the Quran is saying? That evil is about losing your family, is losing your house, finding yourself homeless, being caught in natural disasters, being caught in wars and battles. Does that fit with the Quran or not? We'll see. So there's a few words that Quran uses for evil, but the one I chose here is shar. Okay, shar is the word I'm going to refer to, which is evil in Arabic, and it's a word often referred to in the Quran. And I've split this in two categories. There's two different categories of evil in the Quran. The first category is when it relates to moral teachings, that when the laws of Allah are broken, there has to be some sort of punishment as a result of that. Okay, so good, khair, is good, evil is shar, as I said. It says it's a central theme. You'll find this in both the Meccan and Medinian periods of the Quran. Okay, so some surahs are from Mecca, some are revealed in Medina, but and then they do change, obviously, as you probably know. But the word shar, you can find them in both contexts. So it says here that mankind's violations by acting on specific behaviors which are contrary to the will of Allah, what Allah says, and we do different, then these shar can come out of that. Okay, and bad deeds such as being miserly, rejecting Allah, the creation of Allah, surrounding Allah Himself, acting arrogant. Can anybody think of an example of somebody who was punished for being arrogant? I can think of two. I mean, everyone was arrogant when they disbelieved in Allah. But anybody? Fir'aun, yeah. Good. Any Qarun, yeah. Qarun is very interesting. He said, قال إنما أوتيته على علم عندي. He said, all this I have because of the knowledge that I possess. And Allah warned him, أولم يعلم أن الله, does he not know that Allah has knowledge of all things, and what He has is from Allah. Okay, so he was punished. The earth, فخسفنا به وبداره الأرض. He and all his possessions were swallowed by the earth as a punishment. So the evil came to him as a result of his evil actions. Okay, so this is the first category of evil in the Quran. That it's a result of bad deeds by creation. Okay. Pretty straightforward. So the Quran explains the purpose. The Quran said, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Do you think that we created you on vain purposes and that you'll never return back to us? No. And what's the ayah? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create the jinns and the human beings except to worship me. So there's a purpose to us being here, believe it or not. Okay, there's a purpose, and we have to fulfill that purpose. And if we do not fulfill Allah's plan, then shar will come our way. فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ أَنْ تُصِيبَهُم فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبَهُم عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Those who oppose the Messenger ﷺ and go against his teachings, they should be wary that a punishment might come to them, a fitna or a tribulation might come their way. So the Quran is very clear on this, that if we transgress the laws of Allah, then it's very simple. Allah is capable of punishing us in this world before the next. Okay. So it says here, by neglecting his purpose and accountability, he creates an undesirable condition for himself. So a human being, when he forgets his purpose, decides to delude himself with this world instead of making this world a means for his akhirat. When he forgets there's a coming with Allah, there's a meeting with Allah, and there's accountability, and there's reward and punishment at the end. So every single breath we take is accountable for. Once a human being forgets this, then he creates the shar for himself. Okay, but by following the rules, the Sharia outlined by Allah when He revealed this Quran, man can avoid evil and tribulation. Okay, so man can evade the punishment of Allah by just following His rules. So this is one answer. One answer we can give is the condition God made for us to be safe from His tests or from His punishments is just to follow Him. قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ what's the ayat? Allah, why would Allah punish us? مَا يَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ بِعَذَابِكُمْ إِن شَكَرْتُمْ وَآمَنْتُمْ. Allah saying, why would I punish you if you are thankful to me, if you follow me, then there's no reason for Him to punish us. Allah does not want to punish anybody. That's not the default position. Wallahu yuridu an yatuba alaykum. Allah wants to accept your tawbah. Allah wants you. Wallahu yad'u ila daris salam. Allah wants you is calling you towards Jannah and paradise and happiness. Allah is not calling us to evil, but evil does come if we decide not to listen to that command. And an example of this is the people of Yunus alayhi salam. The people of Yunus, when Yunus left them and he was swallowed by the fish and was taken back to the shores, when he came back, he found his people believing. فنبذناه بالعراء وهو سقيم وأنبتنا عليه شجرة من يقطين وأرسلناه إلى 100,000 أو يزيدون 100,000 or more in his town. فآمنوا, they believed. فمتعناهم إلى حين, so we made them enjoy life and we did not punish them. فلولا كان من القرون من قبلكم باقين. One of the cities Allah mentions all the time which was saved was إلا قوم يونس لما آمنوا, when they believed. كشفنا عنهم عذاب الخزي في الحياة الدنيا ومتعناهم إلى حين. We removed the tribulations and the evil of the world and we made them enjoy what they had. So the first category of shar, of evil in the world, in the Quran is mentioned when the creation takes itself away from its purpose, away from remembering its accountability with Allah, and decides not to follow His commandments. Then that's one of the reasons that evil does come. Okay, so that's the first category. The second category, which is more, I think, more interesting when it comes to understanding the Quran, it deals with human suffering. Okay, and why? And it's wisdoms, and one of the things that we can learn, many things that we can learn from it. Okay, I don't know what I said, theodolite or something. Okay, I've probably meant theology. This type of shar goes beyond the common understanding and is revealed in various historical contexts. It says a careful scrutiny of verses which suggest evil and human suffering are not theoretical problems, but a way of actualization of God's purpose. Meaning, simply put, that the second category is about evil being a means to reach Allah, to reach a purpose of ma'rifah of Allah, knowing Allah, worshipping Allah. Like the verse says, I did not create the human and the jinn except to worship me. So the second category involves evil being a means. That Allah creates evil, allows evil to take place for a means to reach Him. Okay, a means to reach Him. Okay, so remember this, please. And the rationale of the existence of evil is to serve as a trial. Ibtila. I spelled that wrong. Ibtila. It's a trial and a test. Okay. So the first category is a punishment. The second category is when evil is actually a trial for us to reach Allah through. And many of the prophets we'll see later on face this type of evil, the second category. And Allah says very clearly, And Allah says very clearly, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. In Surah Al-Baqarah, we shall certainly test you with fear and hunger and loss of property, lives and crops. However, give good news to those who are steadfast and patient. So Allah is saying, I will test you and I will see how strong you are. I will see how strong you are. And those who show patience and say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, Allah's rahmah will be with them and they will be successful. So there's evil there. But if we survive it, then we are promised rahmah. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. Allah says these are the guided people, and what's best than to be guided in this world. So the second category is about tribulations and hardships and evil befalling mankind in order for them to be guided. Strangely enough, okay, and people don't see that. People do not see that, but and remember when Allah speaks about the ships in the sea, and they're drowning, when the waves, when the waves are strong and the wind is strong and it's blowing, and they're fearing for their lives. دعوا الله مخلصين له الدين لئن أنجيتنا من هذه لنكونن من الشاكرين. Then they made dua. They're disbelieving, they're mushrik, but when it came to that, they realized ألا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه. There's no one to go to except to Allah. Okay? هو الذي يسيركم في البر والبحر حتى إذا كنتم في الفلك وجرين بهم بريح طيبة وفرحوا بها جاءتها ريح عاصف وجاءهم الموج من كل مكان وظنوا أنهم محيط بهم. When they thought there's nowhere to go in this ocean, they da'u Allah, they made dua to Allah that if you save us, we'll be forever thankful. But Allah says after that, they just return back to their shirk. And then it said, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ إِنَّمَا بَغْيُكُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ. O people, you're only deceiving yourself by going back to your misguidance. You're only deceiving yourself. What's the ayah in Surah Al-Isra? ربكم الذي يزجي لكم الفلك في البحر لتبتغوا من فضله إنه كان بكم رحيما وإذا مسكم الضر في البحر ضل من تدعون إلا إياه. All your idols and all that you desire and all that you thought were deities that can benefit you left you once you realized that that evil has come from you from everywhere and there is no way to escape death and drowning except by making dua to Allah alone. So they experienced hardships, they experienced evil, but at the end it forced them. Allah is forcing us to go back to Him whether we like it or not. Easy way or the hard way. Okay, and some people just need the hard way. Right? And they faced hardships in the middle of the ocean. They feared for their lives. Like us, we travel on an airplane. How many times do you see, when a simple what do you call it? Something that happens on the plane, it shakes. And people are I know I'm holding to the seats, thinking, oh dear God, is this the end? Just a bit of turbulence, and we make dua, but it's a very scary moment. It's very hard, but we go back to Allah through it. So this is the second category when the Quran speaks about evil. Okay. So human suffering and its role in God's overall cosmic plan may bring about linking conclusions. Okay, so there's a few conclusions we can come up from this category, the second category. Firstly, that there are no contradictions between Allah's sifat, asma and sifat attributes and the existence of suffering. There's no contradiction. If people say, well, if He's Ar-Rahim, then why doesn't He? No, this is His action. This is His will. Allah is also Qadir. He's Rahim, but He's also Qadir. Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, the one of majesty and generosity. So there's two aspects of attributes. There's the hardships and there's the ease. Okay, so Allah can be Rahim, merciful, but He can also be Qadir and Muntaqim. Okay, and these attributes are not separate. They're all from one God. Okay. So this category shows us that we cannot distinguish between suffering and Allah and His attributes, meaning this is all from Allah. It doesn't negate that He is Ar-Rahim. It doesn't negate that He is Ar-Ra'uf, that He is Ar-Rahman, Al-Latif. It doesn't negate this at all. Okay, but it just affirms at that moment that He can be the Muntaqim, that He can be Al-Jalal. Okay, so this is one thing we can conclude from this category. Another category is that Allah is in power. So if He wants suffering to fulfill His plan, then so be it. And that's His command. And if we recognize He's in power, He's in control, then we have to also submit to this fact. So for an atheist, the question doesn't start, why does God allow suffering? Okay, if an atheist asks you, brothers, does God allow suffering? Why does God allow? Like Stephen Fry, he said, if I meet God, then I'll say to Him, how dare you make these children suffer? How dare you? This man, we should always, as Muslims, answer him by saying, first off, let's discuss God in the first place. Let's remove justice or injustice for a moment. Do you believe in God first? Is He perfect in His attributes? Is He in control? If He's in control, then He has power and He can do what He wants. Does He have wisdom? He has to have wisdom to be an ultimate God. He has to have these complete ultimate attributes. So and then once He recognizes that, yes, this is the definition of God, then what's the problem? What's the problem? If He wants to do in His creation what He wants, we have no say, and He knows what we do not know also. So who told you that why those children suffered? There might be a greater good in that. You don't know. If you recognize God to be perfect in knowledge, then He knows. But He's also Rahim, so He's more merciful to His children than you. Okay, so first off, tackle the question by going to the source of it, God, in the first place. Sometimes they try and trick people who believe in God by going into what I call furu'i questions, questions to the branches rather than let's focus on the root first. And Allah says, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. God, holder of all sovereignty, you give control to whoever you will and remove it from whoever you will. You elevate who you want, you humble who you want. All that is good lies in your hands, meaning you only do good, whether we understand it or not. And second conclusion can come from this, from the second category, is that if suffering is a test and a necessity, a necessity component of life, then a Muslim must view the undesirable situation, like illness, financial difficulty, loss of a loved one, as an opportunity to actually come closer to Allah and move forward in his spiritual journey. Okay, for a Muslim, then a Muslim sees this as an opportunity. If I lose my may Allah protect us all, but if I had three children and they all passed away, by being patient, I, as a Muslim, I know, once I learned this lesson, that I know that by being patient, I'll reach Allah through it. For a Muslim, it's a very different aspect, a different view, outlook when it comes to tribulation and difficulty. The Quran does not really talk or define evil. This is evil 1, 2, 3. But it just seems that the Quran is talking about evil and oppression and suffering as a means for one's spiritual elevation and the closeness to Allah. Okay, it just seems that the Quran, when it comes to suffering, it's a way to get people closer to Allah. And when it comes to natural evil, like a tornado or a hurricane or tsunami, the Quran doesn't really talk about this. I mean, it talks, for example, about the thunder, وَالرَّعْدُ يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ, that the thunder explodes and makes a sound and it's glorifying Allah. But it doesn't necessarily say it's a punishment or not. It's just a natural occurrence. So sometimes when a Muslim says, "Oh, is this a punishment of Allah?" It could be just a natural thing, a natural disaster that Allah obviously planned and Allah fulfilled. It was in His destiny. It was in the qadr of Allah. but it doesn't have to be a punishment or otherwise. It's just a natural disaster. Another example of somebody in the Quran who suffered a lot of tribulation is Ayub alayhi salam. Okay, he's a prophet of Allah. So it says here, prophetic narratives, the stories in the Quran, they make up a large amount of the Quran. And their purpose is to call towards the oneness of Allah, to teach us. The purpose of the prophets, first and foremost, is to call to the oneness of Allah. That's their purpose. But their life is a guide for us. They should be inspiring us. We take from their life and we take from their teachings. Okay? And it doesn't have to be just the one function, but they have many things that we can take from them. Okay, how they dealt with their problems, also how they dealt with the families, the societies, communities. This is carries valuable lessons because they are the optimum of human beings. They are the best of Allah's creations, and Allah made them uswatun hasana for us. وَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِيهِمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرِ. Allah says in Mumtahina that in these prophets you'll find the perfect good role models that anybody who wants good in Akhirah should follow them, and if you follow them you'll be successful. So the line of prophets started with Adam alayhi salam, and he was chosen to become the first prophet, and majority says that he was a prophet. Some dispute this, but anyway, generally he was a prophet of Allah. And after the first trial of eating, he was told not to eat from the tree, and he did eat from the tree. Many other stories are mentioned like this, that are mentioned in previous traditions, where you find them in the Torah or the Bible, Old Testament or the New Testament, some of them. So these are common stories that we share with Christians and Jews generally. And then they talk about tribulations and the tests that Allah puts His prophets through. Okay, the 124,000. One hadith, other hadith say otherwise. But we know that the 25 were mentioned by name, and their challenge of conveying the message of their communities are related. So when it comes to Ad, Hud alayhi salam was sent, Thamud, Salih alayhi salam was sent, to Madian, Allah sent Shu'aib alayhi salam. وَقَالَ عَبْدُ اللَّهَ مَلَكٌ مِنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ. We all said worship Allah and do not associate any partners with Him, and most of their communities rejected them. Ayub alayhi salam, he represents like a perfect figure. Okay, he is an example for how to be devout to Allah. Okay, whether that's in ease or hardships. He was grateful in blessing, and he was patient in hardships. He was grateful in blessing and patient in hardships. He was sincere. He was submissive to Allah. Right? He had, I think, 40 years of blessings. He was a very wealthy man, owned a lot of land, a lot of property. People worked for him, and he had, I think, around 12, 13 children. And these things are a bit ambiguous, but generally he was a very, very wealthy man with a big family. So for 40 years he was grateful to Allah, and he always said that whatever I have is from Allah. So in reality, it might seem that he owned everything, but in reality he owned nothing. In his heart, nothing was there. Okay, so before hardships came to him, he was happy with the ease. He was happy with Allah. He said, this is from Allah. Okay, so when it came to the hardships, he was also patient. Like he was thankful in easiness, he was, and when it comes to suffering, he was thankful. He was patient, and he was called Ni'mal Abd. Innahu Awwab. Ni'mal Abd. What a blessed servant he was. Inna wajadnahu sabira. We found him as a patient. Imagine Allah saying in the Quran that you are a patient person. SubhanAllah. Yeah, what a great honor Ayyub alayhi salam had from this. Okay, Inna wajadnahu sabira ni'mal abd innahu awwab. He was one who turned to us many, many times. So to the Mufassirin, those who commentated on the Quran, what made Ayyub slightly different from others was that he was, as I said, grateful when it came to the beginning of his life when he had so much, but he always attributed his possessions to Allah. And similarly, in the times of hardships, he showed patience and he recognized that he was being tested, which is a positive experience. Okay, and anything negative that came into his heart, he attributed to who? Not Allah, but to Shaitan. Okay, Allah says in Surah Sad, إِنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الشَّيْطَانُ بِنُصْبٍ وَعَذَابٍ, that a shaitan has inflicted me with these thoughts and punishment. So he never attributed these punishments to Allah. And the Quran shows us that both health, illness, prosperity, hardships, these are just part of the plan of Allah. But even prophets are not exempt. And one of the hadiths we'll probably read, it says that the most tested people are the prophets. The people are tested according to their iman, and the prophets are the perfect, of course, examples of those who had iman. They are the highest in rank in the eyes of Allah. So they were not free from tests. So who thinks after the prophets that they can be free from this life? حسب الناس أن يتركوا, do people think that we'll leave them saying we believe? حسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون, do people think we'll just leave them like that, just saying we believe and that's it? No. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ, Allah says, I tested the people before you and I know who's truthful and who's not. So that's the story of Ayyub alayhi salam as an example of somebody who stayed patient in suffering, and how his suffering got him to being a great servant of Allah. Next, I want to look at how when it comes to science of Aqidah, how we can understand. Okay, I just talked about the Quran, the two different categories in the Quran, and I gave an example. I'll talk about the theological understanding in Aqidah. So it says here the early problems for scholars of Kalam. I don't know if his brothers know this, but the Kalam, meaning the science of Aqidah, which is also called the science of Tawheed, was one of the problems is how to reconcile between the divine attribute of power and control with the notion of human free will. So if Allah controlled everything, then when do humans have a choice? That's basically it. Okay. And the discourse resulted in the creation of a few theological schools, and I'll talk about two here. One school, a party went to argue that the attribute of power is absolute and uncompromising. The only agent, they argued, was God. He creates his own actions and the actions of all human beings. So they basically gave no leeway to the human being, that Allah is in absolute control. Okay, and of course he is. This caused a problem though, because does God allow evil? Does God create evil then? If he's creating and in control of everything, and human beings obviously are removed from the picture, does God allow evil then? This was a serious question. It's not a question that your average Ahmed or Abdurrahman mentions in a local coffee shop. No, this is a question put up by one of the great scholars of Islam from the Salaf Salihun. They argued this. So if a Muslim asks this question, it's not a silly question at all. This was debated very seriously early on in Islam, and free will was discussed. Okay, which is deeply rooted in the Quran. Why is it rooted in the Quran? Because Allah says, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. Whoever works and does one good atom's worth of deed, then he will see it on the Day of Judgment. And whoever does an atom worth of bad and evil, he will also see it. So, جَزَاءً بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. This is a reward for what you used to do. So no doubt the Quran speaks about the actions of human beings, that they can do certain things, and they are responsible for their own destiny ultimately. Okay, so when the scholars said that Allah has ultimate control and human beings have no free will, this was rejected quite quickly. Okay, because the Quran, as I said, clearly states that humans have some sort of ability to decide. You decided this morning whether to wake up for Fajr or not. I hope all of you have. Okay, you decide whether you want to go to Dhuhr afterwards or go somewhere else. You decide whether to go pray Isha or to play football with your mates in the night. Everybody has a decision, and that decision also comes from a choice. Okay, so that choice is there. The argument developed seriously between two schools, specifically the Ash'aris and the Mu'tazila. And they both made good, serious arguments, according to their understanding of the Quran. Mu'tazila came first, okay, and I'll not go into them too much, but they were a very rational school, and they argued that human beings are basically in control. Okay, they said, so the Mu'tazila school, as I speak about first here, it says in the title Mu'tazila, also known as the rationalist school, the very rational school. They oppose the idea God creates human acts that include evil. They say that for human free will, they bring about the fact that Allah is Adil, that He is just. Okay, so they say that human free will is there, but it is judged by the Adil, the justice of Allah. They argued God cannot create evil due to Him being just. Okay, so He's just, so why would He create evil? Evil is therefore a direct result of man's freedom of choice. Okay, so they put evil on the hands of the human being, the Mu'tazilites. Okay, they said it's the human's responsibility. But this was challenged, by asking, if God does not create evil, then who creates evil? And who brings about disasters and illnesses? Are they, human beings can't create them. Allah has to have some sort of control for Him to be a God. And if God wills for illnesses and disasters in human life, how can He be just? If Mu'tazila say, okay, then Allah creates evil, Allah creates illnesses. Well, where's the justice in that? So it just proves that if you believe in silly things, you'll end up saying silly things. Okay. So they replied by arguing that apparent evil is actually good, and it is created for a specific purpose. They tried to wiggle out of it. They also said that they stress God's justice, and this eventually led them to be divided in themselves. Okay, so after them came the Ash'aris, and the Ash'aris tried to clear some of the mud on this issue when it came to the Mu'tazilite. So the Ash'aris, they argue that God's justice only applies to humans who are required to follow His laws. Okay, human beings are required; they're mukallaf to obey and follow the rules of Allah because He is their creator. And applying the idea of justice to God will put a limit on an all-powerful creator. Therefore, God is not bound to His own laws. He is just in whatever He does. Okay. So Allah is not subject to His own rules, of course. Allah is ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah has power over everything. But whatever He does, whether we understand it or not, has to be in accordance to His justice. Okay, whether we understand it or not. So this means that all suffering, according to the Ash'aris, this means that all suffering afflicted to man is fair and willed by God, who is just on His creation. Okay? So everything that happens is willed by Allah, and it is fair, and it is according to His justice, whether we understand it or not. And the Ash'aris differed strongly with the Mu'tazila on many things, but the Mu'tazila said that God has an obligation to act in just means, and justice applies to Him as it does to creation. Allah has to do this, Allah has to do that. The Ash'aris rejected this. Allah is He's not answerable to anybody. Okay. Is this clear so far, or am I rambling on? Okay. As I said, any questions, just let me know. So the Sunnis generally, Sunni ulama, they favor the Ash'ari point of view. Okay, and they favor their position, and they emphasize this idea that Allah creates all actions. Okay, this is our aqidah as Ash'aris. Okay, we're Ash'aris, and by default, a Muslim now who is born is Ash'ari by default. So we believe that Allah creates all actions. So when an atheist describes anything, we just reply that Allah creates the actions. But there's an idea of kasb, of us acquiring certain actions. And human beings have the choice. So this is where free will enters into the equation. That human beings, according to the Ash'aris, have free will when it comes to the difference between Ash'aris and Maturidis. I think that's they differ on 15 points, which are not essential when it comes to Aqidah. 15 issues of branches. One of them, for example, is when Allah says kun fayakun, does that happen before the kun or does it happen after the kun? Okay, so it's another question, another issue, inshallah, we might tackle one day. But they don't differ at all. They're normally called Ash'aris in total, but they differ in slight issues which are insignificant. Okay. I'm not sure whether they differ on this. All I've read about the issue is the Ash'ari point of view. I take it that includes the Maturidis as well. Okay. Yeah, it just says Ash'aris in all the books relate to this topic. So yeah, so we believe as Ash'aris that Allah creates the actions, and we as human beings have the free choice to choose. So Allah created the action of waking up for Fajr. A human being has a choice to sleep in or to wake up. Simple. Okay. And God creates all acts. Humans freely acquire certain acts and therefore are accountable for acquiring good. So if we acquire good, we are rewarded with good. If we are bad, we are punished with the bad. Okay, simple. And the Shia, they tend to be Mu'tazila in their Aqidah. They're very rational, and they disagree with the Ash'aris, of course. Okay, they've got an interesting point of view as well. I want to talk about an Ash'ari scholar, Imam Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, and his take on evil, and what he thinks are the reasons and wisdoms behind them. First, just a general idea who Imam Al-Ghazali was. So Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, born 1058 AD. I think he about 52, 53 years old when he passed away, rahimahullah. He studied rigorously. He studied Aqidah, Kalam, Fiqh, Quran Tafsir, the Ilm al-Hadith. He had an extraordinary, amazing ability as a young man to teach. Okay, not only to study and not only to take in all that, but to actually study. And he was given an academic position in a famous college in Baghdad called the Nizamiya. However, something happened in his life that would change him forever and probably change the onlook of Islam forever as well. I mean, we cannot underestimate how important he was. But anyway, however, at the peak of his career, notwithstanding great achievements and recognition, so he was invited by the rulers of his time to come and speak, and not millions, but tens of thousands of people come from all around the Ummah to just listen to him and sit with him, and amazed with what he had, knowledge he possessed, and the way he would express that knowledge as well. Ghazali became doubtful, Imam Ghazali. He became doubtful of the authenticity of his knowledge, okay, because he realized all he had was theory. And once I think he was on a caravan, he was stopped and he was being robbed by his caravan was being robbed, and one of the thieves, they said to him, what do you? He said to the thieves, "Don't take my books because that's what I have." And the man and the thief said to him, your knowledge is in books. Is that how easy I can take it away from you? So he realized what he knew was theory, and it did not have much to do with practice and real practice between a relationship between him and Allah. Okay. So Imam Al-Ghazali felt that his religious knowledge about Allah and his ability to describe him with such, he was very articulate. He would speak about Allah in great language and great vocabulary, but he found that there was a lack of experience with Allah. He can talk about him, but he didn't know him. And many of us find this with the Prophet nowadays. We talk about him and his seerah, but our relationship with him is very, very weak. Okay? And it's the same that Imam Ghazali found here. In preparation to travel, so he made a plan. He said he was going to travel. He told his family that he was going on Hajj and left his 2 children. One of them, I think, died before he left. And he set out. And he set out on a journey, okay, to find himself, basically, on a modern-day retreat, what you would call a retreat nowadays. But before he went, he found himself that he lost his speech, okay. But he lost his speech. He could not speak, and he said, Allah took that away from me. He found that leaving his family and wealth was difficult. It wasn't easy, okay. It was difficult. He had it, and it's very difficult to leave, as we probably understand. So this inner struggle of his lasted for 6 months before he decided he left. Okay, and he could not, as I said, he could not eat, he could not drink. He couldn't. He was afflicted and he was suffered a lot before he even left for the journey. But it says here that in fact it was through months of hardship and suffering due to unexpected physical and spiritual crisis that Imam Ghazali transformed internally. So after this, the suffering he had, then he began to change. Leaving, he left all his possessions. So he found it difficult to leave his family, his wealth, his position. But once these difficulties and illnesses came to him, then he left very easily. And departing to Damascus, he went to Damascus, where he spent 2 years secluding himself in a room in the mosque, in the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. And he was in prayer or in contemplation, searching for an experience with Allah, trying to feel a presence with Allah. Because Allah is watching us and Allah is with us. He's with you wherever you are. But are we with Him? That's the question that Ghazali felt that he needed to answer. And he felt that he needed to experience Allah beyond just the prayer and without any doubt. Okay. And positive impact Imam Ghazali encountered with severe illness, which endangered his physical and mental wellness, appears in accord with the optimistic portrayal of hardships and suffering presented in the Quran. So this seems to be the same as the suffering that inflicted the Prophet. It just drew them closer to Allah. Drew them closer to Allah. And this is what happened to Imam Ghazali. His suffering brought him closer to experiencing a connection with Allah. So there's something we might see now within the modern 2019. Oh, what an evil thing now. This is hardships, this could be a punishment. But for Imam Ghazali, it opened up a new world for him, okay, of understanding. So he came up with something called the best of all possible worlds in Ihya Ulumuddin. The purpose of human suffering is emphasized in the Quran and its core to the Muslim theological discourse, as we just said. It's a very important point when it comes to Aqidah. The practical application of this becomes clear in the life of Imam Ghazali. The impact he had on Islamic thought made him, what was he called? Hujjatul Islam, the proof of Islam. And people say that that if you lose all the books in the world, but you keep Ihya Ulumuddin, you preserve the Deen. His experience with suffering resulted in his powerful statement regarding the creation of the world. He said, "There is not in possibility anything more wonderful than what it is." Okay. So in this lesson, this is the statement. This is quite interesting. There is not in possibility anything more wonderful than what it is. Okay. And the ulama find, even the Ash'aris themselves, they find this quite a problematic statement. They said, of course Allah can create another world that's better. How could it not be that anything more wonderful than this can be created? But for him, the apparent negative experiences proved to be positive. So even the negatives and the hardships of the world, for him it was positive. It wasn't evil at all. It was good for him. And in actually practicing on his theory, on his intellectual knowledge, on his spiritual realities that he kept talking about in Nizamiyya, which he said I never experienced. Now he was experiencing, but he had to go through illnesses to have that. And so during his seclusion, much of his writing, it brought fruits of the link between his Aqidah knowledge and the realities of Allah. He linked Aqidah, because Aqidah is just a science, it's just theory. Practice on it is Iman. Practice with Salah and Dhikr. This is how to increase Iman and make it stronger. Aqidah is there to teach us what Islam is, basically. And people conflate Iman with Aqidah, and they're not the same thing. Aqidah is just a theory, and Iman is the practice and what's inside. So Imam al-Ghazali basically brought this idea in Ihya Ulumuddin, and if we write I find this quote very interesting. It's quite long, but I picked it out. I thought it was very interesting. Imam al-Ghazali says in Ihya Ulumuddin, I think this is the chapter in Tawakkul. You can find it in the first chapter. The first major chapter, which is Tawheed, in the mini chapter of Tawakkul. Ghazali says, everything that God distributes among men, such as sustenance, rizq, lifespan, ajal, happiness and sadness, weakness and power, faith and unbelief, obedience and apostasy, all of it is qualifiedly just, with no injustice in it, true, with no wrong infecting it. Indeed, all this happens according to a necessary and a true order, according to what is appropriate, as it is appropriate, and in the measure that it is proper to it. Nor is anything more fitting, more perfect, and more attractive within the realm of possibility. So everything that happens, which includes the good and evil, is a perfect order that Allah meant this to be. That's what he's saying. Evil is part of the perfectness of the world. It's part of its part of the fact that it's wonderful is the evil in it, which is interesting. For if something was to exist and remind one of the sheer power of Allah and not of the good things accomplished by His actions, it would be miserliness that utterly contradicts Allah's generosity and injustice contrary to divine justice. So basically it's saying that the different things happen for different reasons, and they remind us of the different attributes of Allah. Allah's attributes are many, and they cannot one cannot just take over everything. No, everything we see outside, when we see the rain falling down, that's the rahmah, that's the attribute of rahmah coming. When we see a hailstorm coming, that could be the attributes of intiqam, of retribution coming. So all the attributes are working in the world simultaneously. And that's what he's saying here. And if God were not powerful, He would be impowerful, and thereby He would not be a God. So Allah is powerful in the fact that His attributes are many, and they're all working at the same time. And when he said it is not possible for God to create a better world, as I said, this was criticized by Ash'aris, on his side. But I think Imam Ghazali's look at it was on a tawakkul point of view. He says that to provide practical guidelines to reach a high level of trust in Allah, despite the apparent imperfections of the world. So the imperfections are there to help you reach a greater purpose with Allah and increase your rank in His eyes. Furthermore, prior to making the aforementioned statement, the statement is not possible for God to create a better world, about the perfectness of the world, Imam Ghazali engages in an in-depth discussion on the divine attributes of wisdom and will to highlight their connection. So he talks a lot about hikmah and qudra, will and wisdom, as well as importance of viewing the world as the most excellent work of the Creator. So whatever we see in it, good or bad, it is all from Allah, and it all serves a purpose. For Imam Ghazali, the signs of Allah and His wisdom and His qudrat are many, and they're spread out through His creation. So in order to fully trust in Allah, which includes in the deficiencies of the world, it's in the best of all possible worlds, one must be able to genuinely believe that the creation of the universe is planned and premeditated according to Allah's will and wisdom. So best of all worlds, best of the good and best of the bad is from Allah. As it may be inferred from the above discussion, Imam Ghazali his theory he establishes on a strong relationship between the man and his creator, Allah, and the need to reach an elevated level of trust in Allah in the face of the world's imperfections. So, despite the imperfections and hardships and suffering, the world is meant to be a way of linking man to his creator and elevating that trust in him. Because if there was no hardships, how could trust be built? Okay. So it should also be mentioned that this level of trust, that tawakkul, is one of the highest stations in the mystic path. In the path to Allah, in the tariq to Allah, tawakkul is one of the most important aspects. And as I said, that's why evil is there. Imam Ghazali is saying the best of evil is that it teaches tawakkul. It teaches tawakkul. So take that into account, please. Even if you leave nothing from this lecture except this, that according to Imam Ghazali, one of the aspects of evil is that it teaches tawakkul on Allah and plays a significant role in man's spiritual development. As it may be inferred from the above discussion, Imam Ghazali talks a lot about, I think I'll repeat at this point. Okay, so Allah, the difficulties that come in the world are about building tawakkul in Allah. And very quickly, any questions about Imam Ghazali's theory? Did I make it pretty clear? Or? Okay. Cool. Right. Okay. Brother Saad, everything going okay? So. Right. The development of Sufism. So let's talk about Sufism very quickly. Sufism is a science developed after the Prophet passed away. Like the science of fiqh was developed, the science of aqidah was developed, the science of Sufism was also developed. Okay. Fiqh is the outward aspect of Islam. Aqidah is the theoretical belief of Islam, and tafsir is the science of commentary on the Quran, and Sufism is the science of connecting our inward state to Allah and how to purify ourselves. Because this was the purpose of the Prophet ﷺ. One of the aspects of the Messenger was to purify the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. He was a means of their purification. So that skill and that lesson and that sifat, that attribute is still with us today with the awliya of Allah, who are there to help us come close to Allah and purify ourselves. So Sufism is built on the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, the Quran and Sunnah, it's built upon them, and the zahir practices like the beard, mashallah, or the topi, or the jubba, or the miswak, or the salah, or the zakat, or the hajj. These are outward aspects of Islam. Okay, they are meant to be aligned with also the inner aspects of Islam. Okay, some people focus on the inner. So some people focus on the outward. Mashallah, sunnah beard, jubba all the time, prayer 5 times a day, hajj, but their inside is filthy. It's full of hypocrisy. It's filled of miserliness. It's full of jealousy, hatred, envy. And there are some people who their hearts are clean, but they might lack in their physical outward actions of Islam. They might not pray 5 times a day, but they have no hatred for anybody. Okay, they have no hatred for anybody. So Sufism is about bringing these two aspects together. Okay, bringing the zahir and the batin. And and this can be understood because Allah also is the zahir and batin, interestingly enough. Okay, Allah is the outward and He is also the inward. Okay, the doctrines and practices of Sufis, okay, should be and is, inshallah, according to the framework in the Sharia. Okay, so Sufism is not there to teach Aqidah. There's no such thing as Sufi Aqidah. There's no such thing as Sufi fiqh. Okay, all these practices are based on the Sharia. Okay, so issues when it comes to istighatha and tawassul and dhikr in gatherings, mawlid, well, things are Sufis known for, unfortunately now. So these are not Sufi things. These are things talked about in the books of fiqh, in the books of Aqidah. Sufis only practice. Their job is to practice on that fiqh in order to come to Allah. I hope that is clear. A lot of people don't understand this, unfortunately. One of the most influential Sufis, okay, is Mawlana Jalaluddin al-Rumi, rahimahullah, who was 1207 AD to 1273 AD. I think he died around 60 years old. Who is known in the West for his mystical poetry. So in the West, mashallah, they know him for his beautiful poems, and they are beautiful, no doubt. Rumi, Imam Rumi, Mawlana Rumi, he was born very quickly, his biography, in Balkh, the Persian province of Khurasan, which is a place where scholars are born, basically, and received a very high level of education under his father, who was the distinguished faqih and Sufi as well. And he also trained with a well-known master of Tasawwuf, Burhanuddin al-Tirmidhi. Being educated in the traditional religious sciences in addition to Sufi. So he was trained in fiqh, aqidah, tafsir, and then he became a Sufi as well. So he had to learn fiqh before Tasawwuf. This is the important point. You cannot have Sufi, you cannot be a person of Tasawwuf before learning your fiqh. Okay, because Tasawwuf, as I said, is based on fiqh, not the other way around. So he was allowed, through his recognition, through his knowledge with these two sciences of fiqh and tasawwuf, he began to think about what this all means, what evil and tribulation really mean in terms of in fiqh and tasawwuf. Rumi, for Imam Rumi, rahimahullah, in his worldview, the multiplicity that exists in this world is the effect of manifestations of Allah's asma and sifat. Okay, so everything that happens is according to Allah, asma and sifat. The different names and attributes, they're all working together in the world. Okay. He says here that the only reason that the gardener plants a tree is for the sake of the fruit. Man is the goal of the creation. He is the one that made you a Khalifa, a representative on earth. Okay, this is based on the Quran. Therefore, he is the last creature that comes into existence, yet in reality he is the first. Meaning he is the first, meaning he is the ultimate purpose. So the world was created for him. So in reality he was the first. But as a physical being, he was the last. Okay, this is what Mawlana Rumi means. So according to Rumi, the Quranic notion of the knowledge of the names, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, when Allah says in Baqarah that he taught Adam all the names, reveals that humankind has the capacity to become the perfect mirror. From this ayat, وَعَلَّمَ, and he taught Adam all the names, Rumi says from this, the human being has the ability to become the perfect mirror of Allah's names and attributes. Okay, and all the names actually could be manifested in the human being becoming a perfect human being by learning and continuous practice of religion. Okay. So man's responsibility is to live in accordance with the fitrah. Fitrah is tawheed. Okay, fitrah is submission to Allah, and recognize that that if we go against our Lord, if we violate His rules, then a veil will be put between us. Okay, a veil will be put between us and Allah. The most important phase in man's spiritual development is to get to know oneself. So we have to know ourselves. Like I don't know, weak hadith or athar, it says that if you know yourself, you've known your Lord. You have to know ma'rifatun nafs. You have to know what you are. What's your strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately to recognize that he has been separated from the. So because of dunya, because of nafs, because of shaitan, we are far away from the fitrah. So we have to, through tasawwuf, come back on the fitrah. Okay. Rumi says that the separation of man from his original source is the primary cause for the unhappiness in this life. Why in the UK are the highest form of death, methods of death for under 50s in the UK is, does anybody know? Suicide, yeah? Why are young men killing themselves? Because that purpose in life is lacking. That fulfillment is lacking, ultimately. Okay? So, Rumi says this. He said, the separation of man from his original source is the reason why unhappiness exists in the world. Man tends to forget his divine origin, that Allah created him, and occupies himself with worldly luxuries. Therefore, in order to awaken him from the state of negligence. So, to wake up from this ghafla, the mankind, the human has to be faced with hardships and suffering. So he's moved. The human being has gone away from worshipping his Lord, recognizing his Lord, which is his fitrah, because of the world of dunya, because of nafs. So Rumi is arguing that the existence of evil in the world is there to bring us back to this fitrah. So that's an explanation. Okay. So the last good one. Yeah, so trials and tribulations are necessary for the tazkiyah of a person, to purify him, freeing him from the material attachments and inclinations of his ego. Okay. If we're ill, we're not thinking about which car we're going to buy and how big our house should be. Okay. We're just not thinking about those things. We are focused completely on our illness. So when we focus completely on the worship of Allah and recognizing He is everything, then we will be happy and we'll be on our, we'll have tazkiyat an-nafs. Rumi expounds upon. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he uses as an example somebody who was made a slave. I mean, he was tricked by his brothers to fall into a well, made a slave, tried to was, you know, the wife of the Aziz, the financial minister, tried to seduce him, although he was a young handsome man that away from his family he could have fallen into very easily. And he said, Allah, you know what, prison is better for me than what they want me to do. He stayed 40 years in prison. He came out, and then he eventually became the finance minister of Egypt. So he had to go through these trials to become a slave of Allah and to worship Allah alone. I mean, not meaning that Yusuf alayhi salam was anything other than muwahhid anyway, but it had to be some sort of difficulty for him to understand where the virtues of himself and who he was and his family. Okay. So, and furthermore, Rumi's idea, rahimahullah, he said when a person is faced with a negative balance, so it's, for example, balance, bala, sorry, no. When a human being is afflicted with a trial like serious illness, his attitude and the response towards this condition are of primary importance. And that's what the hadith says. If anything good happens, we are thankful. If anything bad happens, we show patience. Okay, this is important. How we deal with them, the issue is, what Rumi is saying is not that the suffering, whether it will happen or not. The real issue is how we react to it. So as it was alluded to previously from the Quran, that man's entire life on earth, in good and bad, is viewed as a trial and a test. The purpose is to grant him the opportunity to flourish his inner potential by exercising freedom of choice, ikhtiyar. This is freedom of choice, and to strive to find ways to return to his source. So our purpose in life is to try and return back to Allah and recognizing He is our creator, He is our sustainer. This is why, according to Mawlana Rumi and the people of Tasawwuf, this is why suffering happens in the world. So Allah is actually being kind when He afflicts us with suffering. Because how many of us would even make dua at all if we don't suffer? if we're not suffering from something, if evil no evil's touched us. But now, evil comes around and you'll see people sitting in the masjid before Maghrib, making dua, endless dua on Fridays before Maghrib. Ya Allah, Ya Allah. When this is taken away, who comes into the masjid and makes dua? So in a way, suffering, according to the Sufis, is a blessing in disguise. So as Rumi explains, mankind has the tendency to forget God in two situations, in wealth and in health, of course. And finally, I think this is the last one about Mawlana Rumi. Rumi further invites his reader to ponder about times of afflictions when his prayer in ending that suffering appears not to have been granted by God, and to recognize and appreciate that this is more beneficial to him. The longer the duration of the hardship, the longer he remains in a state of... The thing about the third, who keeps making dua? Very, very small amount of people. So if Allah doesn't answer the dua, that could be another blessing, because you're just coming closer and closer and closer to him. I don't know if I have the time. There's a story Mawlana Rumi mentions, I read, that a man was making dua for 23 years. And somebody comes to him and he says to him, how long have you been making dua for? And he said, I've been making dua for 23 years. He said, well, have you seen an answer yet? The man says, no, I haven't seen an answer. So the man says, well, then why are you trying? Meaning, just give up. And the man, he listened, and the man left him, and the man making dua, he stopped making dua, and he fell asleep. And when he went to sleep, he saw Al-Khidr in a dream. And Al-Khidr said to him, why did you stop making dua? And the man said, I stopped making dua because I recognize that for 23 years I've been making dua and nothing has happened. And the man said to him, Al-Khidr said to him in the dream, don't you realize that your dua was the answer? Don't you realize the dua was the answer? If Allah has kept you at His door and preoccupied you with asking Him and humbling yourself to Him and recognizing you're the poor one, Allah is the wealthy. Allah is not in need of you. If all the creations of Allah are busy in dunya and talking nonsense, talking to each other, backbiting each other, but you're here sat in a mosque all alone asking Allah. Surely, don't you realize the fact that you're making dua is the dua answer? Allah knows what you want. Dua, the purpose of dua is not anything other than to show our servanthood and slavehood to Allah. That is why dua exists. Okay. And Mawlana Rumi says, one of the things that he says, a lot of interesting stuff, but he says, when somebody beats a rug with a stick, he is not beating the rug. His aim is to get rid of the dust. Your inward is full of dust from the veil of illness, and that dust will not leave all at once. So you're not beating the rug, you're trying to get the illness away. So Allah is afflicting you with hardships. He's not doing it for you, he's not looking to punish you, but He's doing it to get that purification out, okay, to make you submit to Him. Many, many virtues of patience and perseverance. Okay, some of the hadiths here. Maybe one or two. I don't think I'll go all of them. The Messenger ﷺ says in a hadith, one of the interesting hadiths, he says, عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن إن أصابته سراء شكر فكان خيرا له وإن أصابته ضراء صبر فكان خيرا له. That how wonderful is the affair, is the matter of the believer. Everything that happens to him is good. If something that makes him happy happens, then he is thankful to Allah. If any hardships come to him, then he stays patient, and it will be better for him. So everything that happens to a believer is good, whether we like it or not. Everything has a purpose. That's the point I'm trying to make of all this. Many hadiths, but I want to finish this. These hadiths are well known. You'll find them in books like Riyadh Salihin, Fadail A'mal, Muntakha Hadith, Mishkat as well. Okay. And relying on Allah. Those who rely on Allah, they are people of paradise. Okay. If you rely on Allah properly, then your rizq will become easy for you. Okay. So if you're faced with hardships and evil like unemployment, if you rely on Allah and you do that tawakkul, then Allah will provide for you like He provides for Allah will provide for us like He provides for the bird that leaves in the early morning to search for its worm. Okay, and He gets it. Allah has written that for the bird because it just goes out in hope. It doesn't stay home wishing, making dua. No, it goes. It recognizes every creature knows that Allah is Lord. A human being is the only creature that unfortunately seems to be in denial. But the bird knows who its Lord is, and it goes out, searches for its rizq, and comes back happy, full stomach. And mankind will be the same in the face of hardships if we just did the act of tawakkul on Allah. And this, when we leave the house, is a good dua to say. Bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Bismillah, in the name of Allah, I rely on Allah. La hawla, no power other than the power of Allah. And if we do this, the angels will say, Allah will suffice you for whatever you're going for. Okay? So, in the times of, in the purpose of tribulation, why God allows it is to make us learn, allow us to learn what reliance on Allah is. If everything is easy, who turns to Allah? Nobody. Very few turn to Allah. Human beings, that's what happens. That's why children, you have to, when we teach them Quran, you just have to be firm with them. Okay? No child wants to go and learn Quran by themselves. No one child just goes, okay, Daddy, I'm going to learn Quran. It just doesn't happen. There has to be some force. Okay? But at the end, we realize the fruits of that effort. Okay? And we realize that in face of hardships as well, when God sends them our way. And the story of Musa and Khidr is a very interesting story. It's very relevant to this topic. So, of course, probably you brothers know the story, but it's about. So, in the hadith in Bukhari, Musa alayhi salam was giving a khutbah to his people. He said, and he was asked, who is the most knowledgeable man on earth? And he said, me. Now Allah wanted him to know that there is somebody more knowledgeable than him. So the angel said to him, if you go to this so and so place, and when your fish gets lost, you'll find a man who we've given lots of knowledge from us. And so Musa goes, alayhi salam, and eventually the story is quite long, but he finds Khidr alayhi salam. Now people say Khidr is a wise man, but I believe he's a prophet. I think mentions that, I think, in the Jalalain as well. He is a prophet of Allah, because he does things that only a prophet, I think, has legitimacy to do. I can't see how a wise man can have more knowledge than the prophet. So Musa goes to him and he says, I want to learn from you, from the knowledge Allah gave you. And the man said, okay, you can follow me and see what I do, but you cannot question me whatever you see. If I do something, do not question, just submit to me. And Musa said, okay. So they board the ship to cross the ocean. People have been very kind to them. So in the middle of the ocean, the Khidr suddenly takes out an axe and puts a hole in the middle of the ship. And Musa alayhi salam was like, what is going on? And Musa alayhi salam says, are you planting a hole in the ship to sink its people? They've been so kind to us by letting us be on the ship for free. And you want to sink it? Khidr said, didn't I tell you, do not ask me regarding anything I do? And Musa alayhi salam said, okay. He said, I forgot. لا تؤاخذني بما نسيت ولا ترهقني من أمري عسرا. Don't punish me, don't leave me because of something I said. So Khidr says, okay. So they go and they reach the shores. They go on the land, on the beach. Few children playing. What does Khidr do? Khidr alayhi salam kills one of the children. Innocent. Outwardly innocent. And Musa alayhi salam said, أقتلت نفسا زاكية بغير نفس لقد جئت شيئا نكرا. Could you kill an innocent child, an innocent human being? You've done something incredibly bad. And Khidr said, قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. Didn't I tell you that you can't be patient with me? I knew you couldn't. And Musa alayhi salam said, okay. If I ask you one more time, then you have permission to leave me. So Khidr says, okay. So they go on. And remember, so Musa said, if I ask you one more time, then you can leave me. Okay? Now, the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith that if Musa alayhi salam didn't make that statement, he would have seen more amazing things than the 3 mentioned in the Quran. But because he said, if I ask you one more time, you can leave me, Khidr said, okay, one more time. So they go into a town and they want to stay there for the night. They're hungry, homeless, no shelter, nothing. So they ask the people of the town, can we stay with you? Can we benefit from you? Can we eat from you? And it's actually fard kifaya to look after the guests, by the way, because it's fard kifaya, because the guests have a right. But these people, they had no rahmat, no mercy for Musa and Khidr alayhi salam. So Khidr leaves with Musa alayhi salam, and when they reach the outskirts of the town, they're angry, of course, a bit angry and frustrated. They didn't get anywhere to stay. So Khidr finds this wall that's been broken, and behind it is a garden. So Khidr alayhi salam suddenly starts building this wall, and he finishes it. And Musa alayhi salam was wondering, what on earth is this man doing? Did these people just reject us? And you're here building a wall for them, and you're not even asking for a wage for it. And Khidr said, هذا فراق بيني وبينك. This is a separation. This is the point where we separate. I told you, do not ask me, and I knew you couldn't have patience with me, so we have to separate. But I'll tell you these 3 things you've seen, the wisdoms and the lessons and why I did them. So he told them that the ship that he damaged, he didn't sink, but damaged. He said, if I didn't damage them, there was a king behind that was looking for ships to steal. And he would only take good ships, by the way. Not any ship, but any good ship. So when he comes to this ship, he realizes it's a broken ship. He'll leave it alone, and the inhabitants of the ship will be safe. Now, the people of the ship were frustrated as well, but they didn't realize that their savior was in the ship breaking. The boy that he killed, he said, I killed him because if he was to grow up, he would be disobedient to his parents, and his parents were good people. So he killed him. Now the parents might have cried and they bereaved, and they felt bereaved and distraught about losing a child. But Allah, يبدلهما ربهما خيرا منه زكاة وأقرب رحمة. But this evil, in reality, was going to be good for them in the future, because Allah was going to give them a better child. Allah was going to give them a better child. And when it came to the wall had treasure behind it. And 2 young orphans had rights to this wealth. And their father left it for them. And they're with their mother right now. But I don't want this wall exposed so people can come and steal the wealth that's theirs. So I built this wall to cover them. And their mother is probably making dua. Ya Allah, show us where the money is. Ya Allah, we need the wealth that my husband left for me and my children. Dua, she could have made dua for 20, 30 years. But ultimately their treasure was safe because of what Khidr alayhi salam did. So all these things in the mind of Musa alayhi salam appear to be evil, appear to be inflicting suffering. But with the wisdom of Allah, good things would happen. And before I finish, you know, people like Stephen Fry, when they say, and Sam Harris, and all these, Richard Dawkins, you know, why didn't God stop that tsunami? Why didn't God protect those children that were massacred in that high school? You believe in free will, yeah? Okay. They'll say, yes, of course, we believe in free will. We are in control of our own actions. Then why didn't God take away your hand when you are cheating on your tax returns? If any of them were having affairs with another woman, why didn't Allah punish them? Why didn't Allah take their life at that moment and expose them to the whole of creation? Allah was being merciful to them. If we're going to accept free will, we have to accept free will as a package when it goes for us and against us. You understand? I hope I made that point clear. That just because, okay, evil happens, Allah doesn't stop it. That's true. And that's because of wisdoms behind it. But you do bad things yourself, and Allah doesn't stop you. So free will works for you, but you want it to not work for somebody else? No, free will has to be a complete package, whether it's for you or against you. Whether it's for you or against you. So this was when Musa alayhi salam and Khidr separated. Okay, and they could have gone on more if Musa alayhi salam didn't swear that I'll leave you after this. Okay. So the point is, we don't know what good comes out of these things. And another point, that if we're pious, our children will be pious. وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. You know, the father of the orphans, he was a good, pious man, and Allah made a means for protection of his wealth through him. Okay, so it's important that the best way to guarantee the future of our children is to be pious ourselves. Take the means. But when affliction happens, we do not know. You might be running to a bus stop, trying to get that bus. How many times do we hear people going to an airplane, trying to board an airplane, but they missed the flight? They might think it's the worst thing that could have happened to them. The airplane ends up 6 miles underground under the sea, and suddenly they're happy. Allah saved them. Allah made you miss that bus because you never know. You could have met somebody in that the bus stop that could have been a means to solving a problem in your life. Met an old friend, seeing something which you may need later on. You don't know. We do not know why these things happen, and they happen according to the story of Musa and Khidr for a good reason. There's wisdoms behind evil. That is our answer. Dawood alayhi salam also, when the two angels came to him and he said, and Surah Sad, فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَنَا, judge between us. He said, of course, one is less than the other. But Allah reminded him, no, you do not know. You've not heard the second opinion. You do not know. Sulaiman alayhi salam loved horses, but he killed them when he realized it made him miss the namaz, the salah. Yunus alayhi salam once, again, Zakaria alayhi salam wanted a son. He suffered a lot, but Allah granted Ibrahim alayhi salam. The fire was made cool for him. He said the best moments of my life was in that fire. Outwardly, it looked like a disaster. Inwardly, it was the best thing that could have happened to him. So, blessings in disguise is a term even used by West here. Blessings in disguise. So, to conclude very quickly, 7 minutes to go. And please, have any questions, just give me it now, please. The notion of evil and human suffering is not portrayed in Islamic Quran, the revelation, as a problem. It's not a problem necessarily in the Quran to be resolved, but rather it's a part of the human experience in reaching Allah. Most of the Quranic verses on hardships and suffering suggest that human beings, including prophets, will be tested. So, and scholars of Aqidah, they argued evil. Okay, well, how much evil was the responsibility of the human being? And Marumi says that, as we read, that difficulty, evil is necessary for some people to remove their want for dunya and get acceptance in the eyes of Allah. Sometimes it's just a necessity. And in the mystic path, in the Sufi path, patience, trusting Allah, loving Allah are essential in assisting man to reach his the point of rida, of tranquility. Once a person reaches tranquility, he will be successful. He has reached success in this life, because what more do we want than tranquility and acceptance in our life, and success in the next life? But that has to come through hardship. How many young people I've spoken to, the best thing that could have happened to them was losing the girl they wanted to marry. They love a girl so much. No one could be more beautiful than her. But they lost her. It didn't work out. And they felt it could be the worst thing in the world. It could be. Love can be very painful. But from that, they gained Allah. They would have never gained, because they realized love can only be for Allah. Trust can only be for Allah. Creation is there to harm you and to break your heart. Okay? How many young people realize this? That it's not intimacy, it's not drugs, it's not smoking that makes you happy. It's Allah. But they had to go through that suffering to realize that. Okay? Sometimes to teach a child is just better to make him taste something, right? And he realize how bad it is. Okay, that's it. That's my first lesson done. I hope you've understood what I tried to say. Unfortunately, time is very. I don't think you want to hear from me for more than 2 hours anyway. But there's more to build on that. But I try to keep it as simple as possible, inshallah. Any questions, please? Anything? Okay. Did you understand what I was saying, though? That's what I care about. Did you get my point in this? Okay, that's fine. If it's clear, that I'm happy with that. I think next week and the week after, I'll be doing 2 topics: evolution and Islam, science and Islam, talking about the origin of life and the conflict between the science and religion. And I'll also be focusing on democracy in Islam. So these are 2 different topics I'll be focusing on. So I think free will I've covered quite well today. I don't think I can say more. Is that okay? If you have any suggestions or topics, maybe you can. Yes, I can, inshallah. Some of the words I think through what's it called? The words have changed. I think autocorrect. Yeah, like why did Khalid rebuild the wall? I mean, let's say Khidr. But yeah. Inshallah, I'll think about it. Inshallah, okay. But I really want to cover democracy in Islam and evolution in Islam. But I'll talk about that. Inshallah, I'll try and include it somewhere. Okay. Inshallah. Okay. Jazakallah khair for listening to me, and I hope to see you next week, same time. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.